just to kind of give a little bit of a repeated overview over the terms that we're using this semester and what they mean and what we're doing when, etc. We know that we're designing stages, right? Stage sets. This is technically not really what we're dealing with now. There's a separate phase for this. We are designing the worlds coming from the stories. And the way that this is different is that what fits on a stage is not an entire world. It's a kind of abstracted accumulation or selection of elements from that world. That in some cases, if you've seen theater plays, might be very, very reduced. I'm sure you've seen plays where there's like one chair on the stage and it's meant to represent an office, or there's like one tree and that's meant to represent the forest. So that's why the stage here is grayed out. We kind of withhold the thinking about how we make this into a stage where the audience has a relationship to what the story is describing. And we talk about this for now in this phase, with this focus on creating the world. And hopefully throughout this session, it will make sense what we mean by a world as opposed to a stage, or we already mentioned, of course, that we're building this world in accordance to a story that you select, using what we're calling asset library, that we're also going to be talking about today. And that you already got the first assignment to start to build this asset library based on your choice. We will not be talking so much about this today. There might be questions either throughout the session. Just interrupt me, by the way, at any point, or after when we're done. And the main things that we are... I'm going to skip to the deliverables and then I go back to the steps. So these are the deliverables for this phase. And by and large, the way to think about deliverables in the studio is that if you submit all of these and you follow everything that we have written down here, you're fine. You might find in your project that like, I actually need to print this on a textile and wrap it on something, or I need to print 60 views, or I need to do my asset library needs to be one-to-one, whatever. Like there are ways that you could think about this from your own personal point of view. Let's say, think about this as the minimum, let's say. But also you shouldn't have to feel that you have to do a lot more than this. Now, this is crafted in a way so that we don't put too much on you, that we feel like this is fair to expect within the time frame of how much time we have for this phase. So asset library, we already asked you to just make this very quick rough selections and make this prints. This is a sort of like built-in step to lead to what we're asking for here. 4 printed plates, minimum A3. The reason why we're asking you for such small sizes is so that how you're presenting that size can be also physically well crafted. And whatever random paper an A3 printer spits out, I mean, that goes without saying that will not be acceptable. Like you're creating these as also craft objects. What is the paper that you're using? Are you using a kind of double layer printing where you go on afterwards and add gilding, or you draw on top of them, or whatever that might be? That's why we're asking you for these quite small. And then we're asking you for one huge one, which contains all of them. And this obviously is a big one. So paper sizes, etc., will be less of a kind of, yes, Sidika.
Now another thing, because till Tuesday we need to have like the A5 format.
Yeah.
And that's basically like the finishing of the phase.
This is when this phase is over. This is what we expect then. So basically what we're asking you all for Tuesday is a first kind of fixed format to get started. Yeah. This might also happen throughout the semester, that like things that are not listed here, we might ask you to bring something printed and as part of a workshop or something like this, as part of a, like basically the reason why we're asking you to bring this on Tuesday so that we can all exist in the same virtual world together. If we didn't ask you to print, then every single person will need to plug in, show their mirror board. It's not a sensible way to get an overview over a creative process, right? It's also why we got these big, nice tables. We'll put them all out. We might tape them on the walls, or then what we call the worldviews, which is basically what would normally be called in a normal brief, renderings. Obviously, renderings often speaks very specifically about a certain workflow from digital software. But you can think about them like renderings. We think about them a little bit more like paintings, let's say. They're like very well-crafted views that are extremely specific to what you're trying to portray in your portrayal of the story. So two different environments, printed on minimum A3. Again, thinking about how you're crafting these. Are you framing them? What is your aspect ratio? Maybe actually they don't fit in an A3 because they are very tall and very narrow, up to you. And then also two video clips. And this is something we are not going to be talking about yet. There are no video tutorials about this yet. They will be uploaded next week. Also using the same software. And I'll a little bit give you an overview how this might happen. And then something that we're calling a resource map. And this is formats very open, but basically a document that outlines the use of resources in creating the asset library. Should be printed, but the format is free. Might be a document, might be a little booklet. Basically means like, let's say you decided to use 3 different AI tools to generate this one column or this one tree or whatever it is. Then we want to know, we want to have a picture of it. We want to know like what are the steps that you did to create it. And as much as you can, what sort of resources were part of making that asset. So like, you know that an AI large language model is using some absurd amount of energy. You can ask an AI agent to estimate how much energy went into it. And it's up to you how detailed you go with this. Like if you downloaded something from a website of free 3D models, then list it, who is the author, the original author, and try to find out as much as possible in terms of like how many polygons, how many textures. Again, it's up to you how detailed you go. Basically, it's a kind of making an estimate of what went into making this asset library. Be as detailed as you can, and also with a specific interest that you might have.
That's basically, sorry,
So yeah, go ahead.
basically a list kind of situation.
Yeah, you could make it as a list. You could make it as a big map where you have a picture of all the assets with text below, or you can make it like a big mind map, or you could arrange them in like high amount of resource, as in like how long time they took. Maybe some of them you draw them, you scan them, you 3D print them, you scan them again. Like, so you might arrange them in like how much time they took you to make, making a diagram out of it. Again, the format is free, but you could think about it like a list, yeah.
Maybe to the previous question before, end of phase 1 with a pinup presentation is the 23rd of October. So this here is in about 3 weeks' time.
Yeah. And if you check your base calendar, you will see that we will ask for drafts for these things until then. So it's not like you go home now and you work on all these things and then you show up again with everything finished in the end. We will look at examples together. We will have desk crits and workshops.
Maybe one more note,
Please,
because we're working on this today, or Jan was working on this today. In your base calendar, if you click on the time slot of the pinup, you actually see what's requested in that pinup. So that deliverables list is also noted in the description of the date within the base calendar. Trying to be as precise as possible.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Betsy. And again, to repeat, that is the only place where any calendar information is found. Like there's no other Excel where you might find more information. Basically, you have one resource for all of this. And we will obviously, from time to time, remind you, send emails or in sessions like this. Yeah. So again, this is just in the brief, but I thought it might be useful to go through the steps. So first selecting the story, which hopefully you've all kind of done. Identify key scenes in the story and define the key environments. Ideally, no more than 3 to 4. And establish key perspectives. You will refer to them as worldviews. So from within this world that you're creating. Build a visual reference library, reference board. This is, again, not something we will ask you to submit. It's just something that we are strongly recommending that you do. Like, basically, you won't be able to do this properly without doing something like this, but you can do it however you want. It's a printout on a big board, or it's a Miro board or whatever. It's a Google slide or something like this. Basically, to help you find a language for the style of the worlds Like, is it very 2D? Is it very graphic? Is it very dark? Is it very neon-y? Whatever it happens to be. Like, just find references of whatever kind that helps you build a sense for what the world might look like. The reason why we put this here is also because it will help you direct to kind of what things you're looking for and where are you looking for them, and especially for next week. Like, are you looking for assets in the rare books that we're going to be seeing this afternoon, like photographs of books from the 19th century, or are you looking from Instagram from your favorite artist? It's completely up to you. Study the key references in your board, and then design an asset library, compose key environments, and create a resource map. Again, this text is in the brief that's been emailed, and that's in the little booklet as well. All right, so what we mentioned that we're calling these worldviews, but again, we kind of, as architect, knows them as renderings. Often I find that like calling them anything else than renderings is very useful, because I feel like calling them renderings is locked into a kind of work process that might actually be limiting to you as creative people. In this case, we're creating worlds. There are views of these worlds. And obviously, I think it is interesting to be aware and to think about what architects do when they try to visualize space, because there are trends. I'm sure you've seen some of these things. They look something like you find in a really, really successful portfolio of an architect. But looking at what they looked like in 2015, these already feel ancient style-wise, right? And they're really, really set in a specific time in architectural history already. So think of yourself as always existing in some kind of time that you're not free of the aesthetic pressure that you get as architects to represent space in a certain way. Try to be as free of it as you can, which is why, especially in this brief, but also more generally, we really encourage you to look outside of architecture representation. I would never look at architectural renderings for inspiration for how to make images as an architect. Like, you will make much more interesting choices by looking elsewhere. And also the reason why I often find that it's more interesting to look at paintings, so wide spectrum I'm talking about here, rather than renderings. Because often, especially we look at something like this, or any kind of architectural rendering versus a painting. A painting is the amount of work that goes into making a painting. The fact that like every line has been actually decided exactly where it's meant to go means that the composition has a kind of human creative focus that a digital image will never really have. So we'll be looking this afternoon at some examples. This is from the 19th century, working with very interesting with light, but also look at examples, graphic novels, etc., even from today, but also these French examples from the 60s, 70s, 80s, or 90s of visionary spaces. See how they're using color, how they're using background, the cropping of the space versus cropping of the image itself. Are there people in the scene? What are they doing? How much of the people in the scene is the focus, like the image on the left, which is clearly like you see the image and your eyes are drawn to that one person, and what that person is doing defines the entire reading of what the space is. Versus the image on the right, which, like, if we would Photoshop those people in the scenes into each other's image, the meaning would be completely different. But obviously also to kind of make a point on the fact that, like we always argue, for any kind of creative discipline, we are a connected, continuous creative process where we are never creatively free from the processes of the past. And you will see many examples like this where you see like a visual style of something very new, like a video game, heavily inspired by a visual style of something older. These beautiful paintings from Caspar David Friedrich from the 19th century, for instance. And I would bet you that a lot of the success of this game, for instance, comes from the fact that its visual inspirations are not other video games. But obviously, like the way we see the world, the way we choose to represent it, it is something, the way we do it in first person point of view, in perspective projection, is something relatively new. Representations of space before the invention of perspective show the world in very different ways and kind of often abstract ways. And this is something obviously that's up to you. This worldview doesn't need to be like a photograph of the world. It can also borrow slightly abstract ways to look at the world that's not simply the way we see them with our eyes in perspective. Obviously, you probably, it seems kind of frivolous almost to, or silly to talk about like the invention of perspective and its importance, something that's repeated again and again and again if you're in some form of creative world. But it's important to remember just how kind of new it is. Obviously, we're looking here from a Western perspective, one of the first and still surviving perspectival image in Florence from the 15th century. And just thinking about how some of these devices, like the device that Brunelleschi built in order to draw the baptistry in Florence, the way it's meant to be seen with the naked eye, instead of drawing it the way it was meant to be built, completely changed everything about how you think about the creative process of architecture. And this is the tradition that we're still a part of, and because this led very then directly afterwards into an absolute explosion of creative power in representing space. Basically, the invention of perspective spread slowly throughout the world, and many creative disciplines decided to not ignore it, but say, hey, that's a limiting way to show space. But in other examples, this is a famous example where it was actually presented as a perspective image, but it isn't quite, because the math or the setup of the image is not quite a perspectival one. Other famous examples, obviously, of Dürer's perspective device and all of these machines to replicate the way we see the world in perspective. Again, that created this explosion of experiments and fascination with representing the world like this. And some of these famous examples from the very early 17th century, from Redemond de Vries. Jan should mention, because his son also later became a very famous painter of this style. And that obviously also then resulted in a fully rendered version of this in an explosion of what's often referred to as capriccio paintings, which is what we're going to be talking a little bit more about now. And the word I used now, render, obviously we think about that word as applying to a computer image, but rendering is obviously not invented with computer images. It basically just means that an image has an overlay that suggests depth according to light. So like if you have a line drawing, you can render it with a pencil by drawing in the shadows, right? So like, think about the word more in that sense. These two words will come up again and again, I think. This is another way to maybe call a worldview, a capriccio. It's a very specific set in history. Capriccio and veduta, they're both Italian words to describe this era of perspectival architectural fantasy paintings that were extremely popular after the invention of perspective, basically up until the invention of the camera. Capriccios is largely described as architectural fantasies of interior spaces, and vedutas of kind of imaginary spaces of exterior environments. And obviously, this tradition again continues. You wouldn't be able to Google this. This is what we are calling it. The kind of concept images that you often see for games or for films or science fiction very often uses the same kind of visual tricks. Like these people don't study architectural renderings. They study these sort of mind-blowingly amazing paintings that took a lifetime to figure out how to do. So we just listed some of them here in a chronological order. You can go in and look at the slideshow later on. This is the son, younger Redemond de Vries, a Flemish painter who did both exteriors and interiors. A lot of these more dramatic ones were Italian capriccio painters. Again, none of these buildings you would actually be able to see because they're all invented, which was also part of the fascination. Imagine this is a world where no one had ever heard of a photograph. There's no other way to visualize another space than to draw it or paint it or describe it in words or to set up an opera and to build a kind of fictional stage. So the draw to see them, these kind of paintings, was like someone dropped a new video game like GTA 6 or whatever comes out. The world goes crazy. Like some of these painters would reveal a new painting, people would flock to see them and just like looking at these worlds that don't exist. And again, the reason why they're so interesting to study is because the amount of work that went into the composition, where are we standing, what are we looking at, how is the image cropped, etc. Obviously, people that are famous beyond their images, like Piranesi, that you would have heard of, probably. Maybe some of these other ones that Panini you wouldn't have heard of, but you probably recognize some of these images. Again, other examples of these ruins often imagine of a kind of hypothetical future when these buildings are used in a utopian way. And very, very interesting to look at how the perspective lines are going. Where are people? Where are not? What are they doing? What brings our eyes to the background? What brings our eyes to the foreground? So I would just take some time, make sure you look at all of them, and just quick analysis, like where are people? Where's the light coming from? What's the cropping? What's the framing? How is darkness, lightness used? And we get further and further towards our time, where we reach someone like Schinkel, who we mentioned yesterday, who kind of continued in this tradition. A lot of his paintings are these very famous kind of fantasies of imagined Gothic cathedrals and towns, but he also designed a lot of buildings, and as we mentioned before, designed a lot of opera stages. And this isn't obviously not when opera became a huge deal, but it was a kind of explosion, because like the opera here in Vienna, the big one, the famous one, was built roughly around this time. A lot of new operas were built with new mechanics, new abilities to hang several tons of equipment in the ceiling. They're getting basically more towards what opera stages look like today. So there were like bigger stages could be built. Now this is again from the Magic Flute. And this is something where we'll withhold a little bit of analyzing these in great detail, because these are the paintings for set designs to be built. Obviously, they were not implying that they were going to put in 1,000 ton of stone on the stage. These are combinations of hand-painted paper models, little bits of wood here and there, etc. So this is what we get to later on in the stage of the phase of the brief where we're dealing with the stage, basically the compressing of our worlds into how we represent it on a stage. Okay. We'll transition now to talk about Unreal Engine. And as we mentioned, basically, we've been working with this for over 20 years, professionally within our studio for 10, 15 years. And basically everything we've done, more or less, have been using this software. And it's increasingly user-friendly. Maybe some of you would disagree. Because it was, of course, originally built for the gaming industry. It's literally like when it was first released, when I first used it over 20 years ago, it was to make new levels for the game Unreal Engine Tournament, which is a sci-fi first-person shooter game. So the biggest struggle we had when we were building worlds for this with the software back then was we literally had to write specific code to remove the gun from like the view. Again, it's just to mention that that's where it comes from. It has been completely rebuilt to be more of a overall universal media studio environment to create all sorts of things. But just like we always say that it's important to know and understand the source of something, that's literally where this comes from. A game where you go around shooting each other and shooting aliens. As you see here also, Lara interacting with one of our sculptures. This software, again, you can bring up images, videos. You can also plug in VR headsets. You can build interactable worlds with the very same environment that you're building. So the world you're going to be building right now, like in the next couple of weeks, could become any of these things that I just mentioned. Okay, I'm going to be starting Unreal Engine pretty soon, and we have a small screen here, so if anyone feels like they want to come up and sit closer, I think now is the moment. But I think it's interesting to look at some of these assets as an example to talk about the difference between the world, the asset library, and the worldviews. This is literally screenshots from Fab, which is the new name for this company's basically commercial platform where you can buy and sell assets, so like entire worlds, little bits of sound or animations or interactions, whatever it happens to be. In this case, I'm not going to apply any judgment right now, but Desert Ruins of Palmyra, how accurate is it? That's a very important historical site, has a very complex and interesting history. By and large, you will never encounter any criticality within these environments. That's your job to apply that. But in this case, we're just going to use some of these cases to talk through, again, worldview, and assets. So basically, this is the world. Like if we go down and we see this is the assets. So basically, all of the stuff that you see on that image below is made with these assets. Like there's nothing outside of this image to generate these views. So these are the worldviews that are used to sell this world, basically. And we can look at a few different examples, and obviously, so in your sense, you would have your own asset library built probably by a much wider array of different kinds of things, maybe some textures, images, animations, 3D models you made yourself, you downloaded them, whatever they come from. And again, this is just a screenshot from the software, not, you wouldn't print something like this. We're going to also learn how to arrange the asset library in ways that are interesting to look at. But again, to create the world and these views. Other examples, we're going to be opening up this one. Again, it's just a random storage house set. This is the world. These are all the assets to make this world. And here are some of the views. So I'm going to open up Unreal Engine. And while I do that, wanted to just ask generally, like, who has worked with Unreal Engine at some point before? And that means like you've opened it. You've who?
I've opened it, yeah.
Yeah.
I've done like some test renders and stuff because I do like 3D rendering with 3ds Max.
Yeah.
So we were testing out if we should switch over or not. But
Okay. Yeah. Maybe who has opened it like before the past week or two? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I had a 2 days workshop with it like 2 years ago. And then I just used it to download Pixie Bridge assets. It has the installed one that has really good like nature and concrete. Now they're all cost something, but back then they were free. So I just installed it to get it.
And what's your general experience of the software?
For me, I really liked it. It's very complex. The only thing that was very hard back then, I did not have this laptop yet, so it was very hard to work with it. It like crashed so many times, but it's a real-time render engine. So this was the great thing about it. It can do so much and it looks so great, so fast. But as soon as you do something you're not 100% sure about, it was like, I crashed it.
Yeah.
I did not know what I was doing because I was just picking something that it would be the right thing. It can do a lot. But it's a little bit possible in the beginning.
I made a small game.
Oh, really?
Librans.
Oh, exciting.
Yeah. It was for a design course in my bachelor's. It was just you interact with something and the environment changes. I play with the blueprints. Yeah.
Okay, good. I'm basically, again, we're expecting that no one has opened it before. So obviously it will help you a bit if you have some familiarity. Maybe someone has worked with Unity before and not Unreal Engine. It's another game engine. The reason why we work with Unreal Engine is mainly also because we're more familiar with it, but also it serves the purposes slightly better to create these things like worldviews and films and things that are like visually where you have high control over what things look like. And again, I'm hoping that today we will have like a little bit of time to talk to you all. Like if you, for instance, had problems installing or questions about how you get it to work on your computer, then today is the day to do that. If you haven't installed it yet, that's already like a big no-no. Like we asked you a bit of time ago to install it, make sure that it works. If you haven't, you really need to do it like right now, because
It also takes a little bit now.
it takes a
Depends
while.
on
Yeah,
the-
it's a
but-
huge software. It's basically like every other software you have on your computer in one. Like it's a video editing software, it's an image making software, it's a 3D rendering software, it's a modeling software, it's a physics simulation software. It's huge and complex. Again, so all of these things are in the video tutorial. So I'm not going to stop and explain anything. I'm just going to go around showing a few different things. We're in the Epic Games Launcher, which is where all of your projects are. I have made a project here and prepared that little project that we just looked at. And if you've opened a project before, part of the kind of the weight of the project is saved in a cache on your machine, so it's faster to open if it was open recently. Like if you copy a project to a new laptop, for instance, opening a new project can take several minutes. Just to hope that this doesn't take more than 20 more seconds. There we go. Okay, I'm just going to go ahead right away and open up this project that we just spoke about, the storage house. So in this case, it's someone made this whole assets library, put it together in a world to demonstrate what you can do with this. And when you download it and put it in, and you open it, you can either open all of the assets separately, or you can just open what's usually called the demo world. And for our purposes today, that's quite useful because we can actually demonstrate why we would use the software. So as what was just mentioned by Valerie, that it's a real-time software, for those of you who don't know, which means that there's no rendering time for anything. Basically, what you're seeing on the screen as you're working with it is the final product, basically. And the truly magic thing with this, and the reason why we work with it when we do VR films, when we do films, is because it's really like working like a set designer or a theater director inside of the stage as you're working with it. Like, so if I'm going to push G on my keyboard to remove all of those lights there. So I'm just moving around live here. So as I'm moving around, I'm just going to change the camera speed also here. As I'm moving around, you see that it's fully rendered. You know, all these lighting effects, all the shadows, the reflections in the floor, everything is happening in real time. And this is, again, the magic, especially the magic on working with it when we're creating something like a stage set. We're working with representing stories and building worlds. So all of those assets that we just looked at in that slideshow, they're in here. Many of them are copied several times, and they're copied in clever ways so that we can't see the repetition. Click on things, you see here that like we can move things around. And I've saved a few camera angles, just using Control and the numbers on my keyboard. So I can just switch between some of these views that I've just selected just this morning. And these worldviews that we keep talking about, like, again, this is in the tutorial, but how we would do that. Let's say this is your world and you want a view from this perspective. We go to this add button, we go to cinematics, we add a camera. Going to zoom in on it. You see that there's a camera here. We move it up to where we want it. Let's say we want this view like that. We can see here in this little window what the camera is seeing. Malika, have you got a question? Yeah.
Just like something that is animation or something that it will change depending on how it gets around us and then it will. So Is it like looping all of the time or like
So question of animation, like it's listed in the brief that there could be animated things as part of the asset library. And I would imagine that because it's in the world, it's something that's looping. I don't know what that would be. Maybe a Ferris wheel that constantly moves around, or a tree that slowly moves its leaves, or something like this. And yes, it can be part of the asset library. And I don't think in this pack here we have anything animated, but you can animate things in a different software like 3D Studio Max or Blender, or download an animation, just an FBX that has an animation imported in here, and the animation will play. And then you can set it to loop, or you can set it to play forward and then backwards again, or so yes, it can be. Yeah. And also we're going to be working with creating videos from Unreal Engine as well. So that's also another way that we can work with showing how these animations are. Because obviously in your printed asset library, maybe you can represent an animation by having several layers printed and you can lift them up or something like this. But the printed version, by and large, wouldn't show time. Yeah. So we have this camera. I'm just going to spend 5 minutes setting up a nice camera view and just get an image out, get a world view out of this space. By the way, I'm going to stop to save. I would recommend that you save very often in anything you do, but especially in this case, because before you know how Unreal Engine likes to live on your computer, it's very common that it crashes. So again, we can see our little camera there. I'm going to go here to perspective and open it up so we see the whole view of the camera. And now if I have my camera selected, and I lost it. Where is it? I'm going to search for it. Camera. There it is. So we can continue moving it around here in these settings down here. We can change the default setting of the camera to something like a Super 8 or into a IMAX camera. It's dealing with the kind of lens settings, the kind of croppings. But you can also go in here afterwards and adjust these things and adjust the f-stop, and basically the cameras in Unreal Engine works like a real camera. You have basically the settings that you would have on a digital SLR camera you have in here. So we can also zoom in if we want a very zoomed in image or very zoomed out. And you can see here that it starts getting blurry. Interesting. We can actually go in here and under focus settings, use the camera to focus on specific things to create depth of field, to create cinematic effects, etc. And we can also, under these different settings here, change things like under the post-processing here, we can, I don't know, we can go ahead and change the temperature, or we can change the saturation. I'm not going to go through all of these settings. Let me just make it black and white or very saturated. I won't explain anything more, but one thing that I want to do is I want to have a different cropping, different aspect ratio. So I'm going to go here and change the sensor width. And make something like this. Pretty random view, but let's say this is my final image. I'm going to save again. Simply go to this tab here, high resolution screenshot. Click that button. Takes a few seconds. You can change these settings to get very high resolution images. And then go to the project folder where all of my Unreal Engine projects are saved. Under saved, screenshots. And there we have it. One world view done. So again, no more rendering times. Like you can create 100 world views in an hour if you want. Basically like just walking around taking pictures of the world that you create. And again, this space in Unreal Engine here, it's not a stage. This is a world. like just to think about them differently. This is the world that you're creating. So think about if, let's say you chose My Neighbor Totoro as your story, and you're interested in the world inside of the tree or the cat bus or something like this, and you're thinking about how am I going to represent it? Try to be again light with your style, etc. Don't put the camera and build the view, build the world, and then extract views from it. So you build a world, like imagining that it's a video game almost. And then once you're done, you bring in cameras and it's like, what about this view? This could be interesting. What if it's really tall? And then you go and change to another one. And yes,
We're building the world with the assets we collected ourselves or downloaded or whatever. Like then on a collection of 50 assets or whatever. And then we put them in the world and create out of the assets these words or
good question. Yeah. So what we're asking you to do next week, it's these assets that we're asking you to print, they do not necessarily need to come from our Red Engine. They can be cutouts of your like Spar catalog or whatever. It's to start to look at the composition of a stylistic world. But when it comes to building the world in Unreal Engine and creating the worldviews, obviously they need to get in here somewhere. You can literally just scan a photograph or something and import that texture and have that as a PNG image. You can import GIFs. You can import all sorts of things. So if you have like, I want this mug to be one of my assets, or let's say you find a really beautiful Otto Wagner lamppost, you 3D scan it and import it in here, right? So don't like, basically anything can go in here. But I would suggest that once you've finished watching the tutorials, you start to experiment with the ways that things are already built in here. So we can go down to, Benson, do you want to add
Yeah, I
something?
just want to add what you said before on the sequence of the workflow, and just lately saying that is, in my opinion, quite a fundamental difference of, let's say, how a stage set designer would work. So puts himself into the perspective of the audience and designs that one view for the stage, versus an architect who first designs the world and then selects the views. It's a small, subtle difference, but if you would extract that into, a professional domain, I think that is a fundamental difference between stage set designers or stage designers and of architects.
Yeah, that's a good point. So as an example, to bring in an asset, this is what Valerie just mentioned, Quixel Bridge, which is this plugin with extremely high resolution 3D scan things. So I'm going to be bringing something in. And in the meantime, Sidika, yeah?
also just add assets during the time of this semester.
Good question. Yeah, definitely. Obviously, you will print at the end of this phase. We'll print some form of final version, but obviously after that, that's what you bring to your group when you start to build a stage. So you might discard half of the assets that you bring to the table because you need to somehow agree on a new stylistic format for basically all of your work together. And you might say like that, a whole asset library, this is so awesome. Let's just bring a few things from the other groups, or you find a different way to maybe you randomly say we take 50% of all assets, or we take all of the assets from all of the people in the group and we build a world together, and then we see what type of collage like environment it creates. But your own asset library is finished at the end of this phase. Basically, you print it out and it will be a part of all of the presentations, midterm and final as well. Yeah. Forgot that you need to sign in here, which I'm just going to do quickly. Any other questions? Shall we?
Yes, which 3D scanning app would you recommend?
Good question. There's going to be a workshop on this. Betsy, I don't know if you want to, or Maya, if you want to, Maya, you want to, yeah.
I selected two to work with. One is Polycad, and the other one is Kiri. There's even a instructional manual already at the base that you can look at. There is also a version, Mashlab, yes, which is Mushroom, thank you, which is only desktop based. It might be that some of your phones are not, I mean, mine is not great either. So, you know, if they cannot support the apps, which they should, but if they don't, you can work with many images that then you assemble to the desktop application, which actually I think even Polycab and Kiri, they all have also the desktop version. And then the Mesh Room is purely desktop based, where you work with an array of images.
Should also mention that since only a few months, Epic Games, they bought this company called Reality Scan, which is now for free and built into what you've already downloaded, and you just need to install this software, which basically is a kind of super advanced 3D scanning software where you could import like 1,000 photographs you take with an SLR camera or with a drone or something like that to make like a 3D scanned map of an entire building from or a whole landscape, something like this. So we won't give any tutorials about this, but just giving you a heads up that this is also available. Okay, just going to show you an example of like in your early sketching days, how easy it is just using some of these built-in things. So gonna bring in this door here. We can simply just drag it in. Need to rotate it. Still loading its textures, but that's how easy it is to drag things in. It's extremely straightforward. And there's both this Quixel bridge built in here, but also what they call Fab, which is like the entire library of all of the things that are commercially available. But you can go in and search for something like a building or something like that, and then click lowest price first, and you'll get all of the free examples first. Okay, that's the kind of very, very quick, just showing you a little bit of what the software is, how it works. And hopefully these tutorials, the first 14 are, the idea is that basically following that, you'll be able to do what is required of you for this first phase, not including the video clip, because that's again, tutorials that are coming. And is there anything else to add, you think? Or
no, maybe the only thing, sorry, that I wanna say again. So for all the new students, right? I hope you all have your university email addresses, because then we add you to. We used to say base, but we never explained what the base is. So the base is this. It's a university platform, right? Through which you get an email address. You have storage space on there. We use it to organize all our work and all the files. So there is also a base shared folder to which you have access. Hopefully you have it already. Yes?
Yeah.
No?
Yeah.
Yes, great.
It's also a WhatsApp group.
Exactly, where all the resources are in. If you don't have it, then just please make sure you get it as soon as possible. Another thing is also that you probably, if you don't have a card yet, this card also allows you to print, right? Just because, you know, then you have access to the printer, right? So all of those things, if you really settle them, then you're equipped to use everything you need. And there is a bigger printer in the back. I don't know. I mean, your colleagues will know. So just ask around. But there is a plotter in the back where you can plot everything which is outside of A4 or A3. We have paper. Maybe Sarah can help us a little bit, you know, to so that you get to the paper. So if you need anything, just let us know.
Can we get a new machine, cotton machine?
I don't know. That's
difficult.
a wrong question for me.
Also,
Why?
what Maya just mentioned, there is a Studio Space Popular Linktree account. The older students have it, you guys can jump on it. And all of these useful links are listed there. So from the tutorials to YouTube, to share base folder. We're going to be continuously updating. So for example, this presentation is not on there, but it's going to be on there by the end of today. Yesterday's intro presentation, the slides are already in there. So we keep uploading whatever is really essential to work, centralized.
Great. So just going to spend another 5 to 10 minutes talking about the books we're going to be seeing. Just a very quick overview over some examples. And then after that, we're going to stay in here until for another 40 minutes for people to open their laptops, open Unreal Engine, and see like how far can you get. If you don't have your machine here, you should. Or if you have your machine in there, basically we will walk around and make sure that like you have spoken to one of us before we leave to explain like, are you good to go? Everything's working, or do you need help with something? I'll just have one more example to show in this like world, asset library, and worldview. Again, to just give a sense for how astonishingly uncritical this world is. A lot of these assets are made for the gaming world, where like the amount of kind of like, this is in some kind of post whatever nuclear something, or in this case, Slavic village. Like I would when building your asset library, think about the individual assets. You're building a new world. Where they come from, we want to know. But like in this case, like basically this person selling this is claiming that you can build a whole Slavic village with these assets, and for what purpose and for whom. Like just kind of as you're scrolling through all of these different things, you'll see a ton of different free, expensive asset packs. Like apply your increasingly critical eyes on this.